And we welcome you to our Two on Your Side town hall on this election day in Western New York. After 4 months of one of the strangest, most bitter mayoral campaigns in history, voters finally getting their say on that and a lot of other important races tonight as well.
Yeah, another reminder, you have about 3.5 hours until polls close. Then all eyes will turn to our local boards of elections as they'll be tallying the ballots. People we've spoken with at several locations today indicated that turnout seems to be pretty low, which isn't that surprising considering we vote in these important elections in odd years when people just aren't paying as much attention. There has been very high interest, though, since Buffalo Mayor Byron Brown lost the Democratic primary earlier this year, making India Walton the only name to actually appear on the ballot in that race.
Our partners at Investigative Post interviewed 120 voters across the city to talk about this important race. They wanted to know, how did they come to their decision and what kinds of issues are most important? And here to talk about those findings, Jim Heaney, editor and executive director of Investigative Post. Jim, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
So, Jim, let's start with the incumbent in this race. He's been around for a long time. He's been in office for a long time. What did you hear from the voters with whom you and your colleagues spoke about voting for Mayor Byron Brown?
Well, those who voted for him like the fact that there's been a lot of development, particularly downtown, and they think he's provides experience. So they like the fact that he's been around a long time, although not everyone. There were a fair number of people we spoke to who said, well, I voted for him, but if there had been a better opponent, I might have voted for that person. But, you know, those who voted for him, they like his experience and they feel the city's moving in the right direction.
So some interesting perspective there. So let's ask the same question about those who cast a ballot for Democratic Socialist India Walton. What did they have to say about why they wanted to vote for her?
Well, she's a fresh face. They like her energy. They like her policy ideas. They like the fact that she's talking about investing in parts of the city that historically have not seen a lot of government investment. It's also interesting in talking with people. A lot of people weren't so much voting for someone as much as they were voting against someone. A fair number of the Walton voters we spoke to felt that Brown had just been around too long, and it was time for a change, and that they felt that he had not done enough for folks who live in poor neighborhoods. On the flip side, a lot of folks who voted for Byron Brown felt that India Walton just has no business thinking about running a large government like the city of Buffalo. She just lacks the experience. In some of the more conservative neighborhoods, there was a bit of a backlash on her being a Democratic Socialist as well. You know, very, very polarized voting base here. You know, they liked the person they voted for, and they really didn't like the person they were voting against.
Yeah, that is a really interesting way of looking at this. Now, to be clear, this isn't a scientific exit poll like we get in the race for president or some others, but this really does kind of give us a sense, like a voice of the voter type thing, because you really did talk to a lot of people throughout the city, a diverse group of people. What other things did those folks have to say, Jim, about this race or the city generally?
Well, again, depending on who you voted for, you think the city's headed in the right direction or the wrong direction, or at least certain parts of the city have been overlooked or ignored. Some voters brought up education in the state of city schools, and they felt that attention needs to be paid on improving the schools. I was a little surprised that Brown's support from the right, from Republican operatives and from corporate interests, it generated some comment, but not as much as you might have thought. But there were a couple of folks who were really, really agitated about Carl Palladino and the fact that Byron Brown, after saying he wouldn't take money from Carl Palladino, took money from Carl Palladino. So those are the other things that kind of jumped out of. We interviewed people in all 9 council districts, and it was really, who do you vote for and why? We didn't get into a whole lot of other issues because we just had to get in and get out. There were, 4 or 5 of us, and and a lot of voters coming in and out. But I do think it gives you some insight, maybe no great surprises, but it gives some insight into what people are thinking. I will add, Michael, you mentioned at the top that the voter turnout is relatively low. I think that's, I don't know if you want to say pathetic or disturbing, but this is a race where people had a real choice. This wasn't Tweedledee versus Tweedledum, and it's generated a lot of national attention. And the fact that that the voter turnout appears to be what it's going to turn out to be, I think really says something troubling about the state of democracy in the city and civic engagement. What does it take to get people out to vote when the candidates pose such stark differences in how they would govern?
It's a conversation we could continue for our whole half hour, but we have to leave it there. Jim Heaney, editor and executive director for Investigative Post, thanks again for joining us tonight.
Thank you.